Clement Nyirenda from the Department of Computer Science at UWC Library. Dr. Nyirenda is currently the eResearch Director in the Office of the DVC and will be sharing us a presentation on AI tools for academic research, opportunities, challenges, and ethical issues with us today. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Clement, and I am with the eResearch unit as a director in the Office of the DVC Research and Innovation, but I've been with the Department of Computer Science here at UWC for, I think, since 2018, since the end of 2018. So my talk today is going to touch on AI tools for academic research, opportunities, challenges, and ethical issues. And the major aim is not to look at all the AI tools that are there. There is a lot, and there is a lot still coming up, but it's just to look at a few and then also look at challenges and ethical issues. So the presentation outline, I will begin by defining what is artificial intelligence, and then I will talk about the issue of predictive AI versus generative AI, and then the issue of incremental prompting in LLMs, and then the AI tools for academic research, and then the challenges and ethical issues. So to start, what is artificial intelligence? This concept has become so famous these days, especially with the emergence of ChatGPT towards the end of 2022. And unfortunately, many people, when they think about artificial intelligence, they think that it's ChatGPT. But that is not true. ChatGPT is just one component within the big field of artificial intelligence. So basically, artificial intelligence is the science of developing methods to solve problems usually associated with human intelligence. So if there is something that requires human intelligence to be done, and then if you are able to develop tools that are able to solve such kind of problems, then we say that that is AI. And amongst the alternative definitions is, some people would say, building intelligent entities and agents. Somebody would say making computers think or behave like humans, or studying the human thinking through computational models. Somebody would say generating intelligent behavior, reasoning, and learning, and so on. Because AI is being approached from many different fields, so there is a wide range of definitions. And basically, as I mentioned, AI is approached from many different fields, so we see that it's not just computer science or mathematics, but fields like sociology, psychology, philosophy, they are actually also contributing to the AI field. And of course, neuroscience and mathematics, those are ones are as expected. But I know one bigger contributor is statistics, and I feel like in this presentation, statistics is included as part of mathematics. And in terms of applications, the applications of AI are a lot, from finance to gaming to astronomy, healthcare, e-commerce, robotics, automotive. So it's all over. I think every area of our lives is affected by AI, even before the emergence of ChatGPT. And so what is the biggest picture in terms of AI? So you see that we have this bigger block here, and that is artificial intelligence. So basically and historically, things like natural language processing, knowledge representation, automatic reasoning, intelligent robots are all part of what we call AI. But within that AI, there is what we call machine learning. So that's where you train computers based on some data, and then you afterwards bring in data that was not used in training the model. You bring it as inputs, then the computer will be able to do things like classification, things like regression and the like. So that's where we see all these tools, as we see random forest, decision trees, support vector machines and the like. Then within machine learning, there is neural networks. And in neural networks, there is things like multi-layer perceptron, Boltzmann neural networks. And then maybe more than a decade ago, we entered a realm which we call deep learning. And that deep learning has been the subject of intensive research for more than a decade. And that's where we have convolutional neural networks, deep belief networks, recurrent neural networks. And generative AI that we see coming up now through the likes of GPT, ChatGPT, is actually belonging to deep learning. So when you talk about ChatGPT, is right in here as a case of generative AI, and belongs to deep learning, and belongs to neural networks, and belongs to machine learning, which belongs to artificial intelligence. So basically, now from this diagram, you see that we have generative AI inside there. And then it has made everything else that is not generative AI, which you call the traditional AI, to be defined by another name. So that name that you define that with is what is now being known as predictive AI. So when you put predictive AI on one hand and generative AI on one hand, you have these few distinctions or differences. The first is that predictive AI will aim to make accurate predictions or forecasts based on training data, while generative AI will focuses on creation of new and original content that resembles its training data. Then predictive AI will require labeled data with known outcomes to train models. On the other hand, generative AI does not require labels. So it will learn the underlying patterns and structures of the data. And then predictive AI uses techniques such as regression analysis, time series analysis, classification algorithms, where generative AI will generate content by learning the probability distribution of the training data and sampling from it. And in terms of applications for predictive AI, we have financial forecasting, fraud detection, and all that we see in there, and many more. While in terms of applications of generative AI, we have applications in art and design, fashion and product design, music composition, content creation and understanding, virtual worlds, software development, and the list also goes on. And but now, if we look at this from another perspective, we have AI there, then we have machine learning, and inside there we have deep learning. But the space where generative AI and large language models fit in is that space in there. So this space that you see here is basically an overlap between these two other Venn diagrams. So these are like application areas: natural language processing and computer vision. So where deep learning intersects with those two, that's where we find generative AI and large language models. And right now, this is the generative AI revenue forecast for up to 2032. As of 2020, we had, I think it was, or 2022, 40 billion US dollars, that was kind of revenue, but the projection is that by 2032, it will be 1.3 trillion US dollars. And it's a market that is going to be big, and you can see that the total technology spend will also be increasing in the direction of generative AI. And these are examples. So when we talk about generative AI and large language models, my take is that large language models are a subset of generative AI. And there are other aspects of generative AI models that are out there. But what really resonates well with us is large language models, because we are people who speak, and we are based on language in every aspect of it. So these are the best large language models in 2023, as presented by data science. GPT, you see it there. That is ChatGPT 4 is based on that GPT 4 there. And PaLM 2 is Google's best large language model, while Llama belongs to Facebook, which is now called Meta. And I know ChatGPT is one we are familiar with, but there are many of them. And in December, Google will release their own, like an update to PaLM 2, they call it Gemini. So you can search it online, you will find it. And it's a multimodal large language model where you can use text, images, and stuff like that. So it's available. And I feel like if you don't pay for ChatGPT 4 and you're only using ChatGPT 3.5, maybe Gemini can also be good in many aspects, because the release is based on more recent training. And I'm sure that all of us have tried ChatGPT at one point or another with mixed success. Some people have had exciting results. Some people maybe didn't get what they wanted, and they have written it off completely and written off large language models completely. But I want to show you something. I want to tell you that these large language models, they suffer from sometimes being inconsistent, giving incorrect results based on a number of issues that we'll see later on. But one technique that is very important and really helps is the issue of incremental prompting. So I'll quickly take you through what this entails by an example. So in this case, I asked Llama. Llama is a large language model by Facebook. So I said, are there examples where federated learning has been used to train large language models? And then it said, yes, federated learning has been used to train large language models. One notable example is flight. So when I looked at the title of the flight model there, I noticed that this is nothing to do with large language models. So I came back. I said, can you share the paper that published flight? Then it shared this paper with me. And the title of the paper is clearly has nothing to do with large language models. So I came again and I said, this does not look like, well, I made a mistake, but it still captured my intent. I said this, I was supposed to say, this looks like generic natural language and computer vision tasks. I do not find anything about large language models in this paper. Then it replied, I apologize for my mistake. You are correct that the paper I mentioned earlier does not discuss large language models. The paper primarily focuses on developing a federated learning framework and all that. So I came again with another query. These images are big. So I said, I came again, I said, are there examples where federated learning has been used to train large language models? Then he said, certainly yes. Because now I refused the other result, then it came with a better result. And in here, it gave me papers that are really on large language model using federated learning. So I continue to say the papers that it gave me before are from 2022. So I said, are there papers from 2023? Then he said, yes, there are several papers from 2023 that discuss the use of federated learning and gave me examples. And as you can see, the references there. And then I said, this is really good. I know I'm taking you too far, but please try to share some papers on this subject from 2024, if possible. Then it said, hello, I am happy to help you with your query. However, I must inform you that I don't have access to any papers from 2024, as they have not been published yet. So This is understandable because Llama's training is up to somewhere in 2023. So, but you can see that by my incremental prompting, from a disappointment, the result that I got was pretty bad in the first place, but I prompted it and went further, and then it eventually managed to get better results for me, because these large language models used our input to improve themselves in the next query that we bring in. So when you put in the first query, don't just give up. Come again with more wording or explanation, then eventually you might pick out what you really wanted. But now, as a researcher, to be doing all this sometimes is really cumbersome. So there are some tools which some people have developed which help in these aspects. And I'll quickly go through maybe 3 of them and give a list of the ones that you can go and experiment. The ones that I'll share are actually either free or they have a free mode that if you want, you can upgrade to pay. But usually for some of us, especially students, the free version will suffice. So the first one is consensus. So consensus actually helps you to do ask questions in a natural way, and it will refine your search using various criteria. And somebody said, if ChatGPT and Google Scholar were married, the marriage would give consensus. So it will use maybe ChatGPT behind the scenes, but it will also use stuff from Google Scholar behind the scenes. So I have one example what I did here. So I said, can generative AI models be trained using federated learning? So usually you need to ask questions like this. And if the answer is yes, it will show on the consensus meter that how many people said yes, how many papers, the percentage of papers that are in the affirmative and the percentage of papers that are not. So it will show in here, but it will also give you a summary of what the studies are suggesting. So as you can see here, and then there is also a copilot which will show examples of those papers. So in here I have 10, but I only could get a screenshot of a few of them, as you can see on this slide. So these are examples of papers. So it also shows the year of publication, the number of citations, and the like. So this is consensus. So it is a good tool for your literature review, for you to get the papers that are in a particular area or the general research, the general direction that research in a particular field is taking. And then the other one that I got is elicit. So this one will find papers related to your research question faster, and you can explore it from different perspectives. It creates summaries of the articles, and I tried to run it. I just said, I need papers on evolving neurophase systems since 2022. And then it gave me this summary. So you can see these papers, 2022 and 2023. And it goes on to show, so this is what I like the most. So these are the papers that are there. As you can see this side, I hope you are able to see my screen. And this is the abstract summary there. So I can go through the abstract summaries of so many papers, and then there is some more stuff that I can add. So if I can add limitations that have been identified in those papers. So these limitations are the ones that are good for a researcher, because the people will say the things that their model could not do, their work could not do, maybe their future work will address, and it's easy to pick up research ideas from these places. And if you want to check the methodology, you can click there, then a column will come up there. So that is elicit. And the other one is Research Rabbit. So this one will map literature based on citations. So it's a citation mapping tool, so to say. It will create a visual map for to represent connections between papers. So you can either put in there the name of a paper or just any topic. So in this case, I had this paper which I uploaded in there, evolving neurophysical systems-based design of experiments and process identification. So this here is like a summary, and this place is where you see all the citations and similar work and all citations that have cited this paper. And it creates a map of the references, as you can see there. If you try to click on any one of them, it will open up something similar to that, and you can keep going and on, and you'll be able to save some of those papers that you like. So I basically touched on these three tools because I think they are really good for literature review. And then there is more AI tools. Some of them are coming up as we speak. I won't have time to go through each one of them, but most of them are for literature review, checking the literature, because the literature is in form of text and also in form of writing, like to help your writing, things like Trinker, Grammarly, Quillbot. And for those people who are in qualitative data analysis, Atlas I nowadays is powered by open AI tools. So that's it about the tools. The final part of my presentation is on ethical issues and challenges. And somebody said, all of these AI systems we see, none of them is real AI. So bear that in mind, because none of them is the real AI, then we must be careful when we use them. So the first challenge is that these AI models have the capacity to generate amazing information. And sometimes, because of the way we interact with them, we feel like, wow, everything that comes out of this is correct, is true. But there is also a lot of false information. So you as a researcher, you're supposed to be in control of what you are getting out of here. And why is there false information coming out? Well, it's basically because sometimes training data is inaccurate. And because training data is inaccurate, then it will generate false information. And then the feedback loops that are used in generative AI are good for its performance, but they may intentionally amplify biases in training data. So usually there is a need to train these models on diverse and representative data sets to avoid perpetuating or all those biases and fake data. But such data is scarce, especially from the context of developing countries. So when you use these tools, you must know that they are capable of generating false information that will really look like it is on point, but it's wrong. Then the issue of data privacy and security. The large training data sets that are used in training these models may contain personal and sensitive information. And that is dangerous for the users. Then the training process may also suffer from adversarial attacks. Adversarial attacks is whereby somebody comes in to tamper with the training process so that the model that comes out of it is not good. And then when you are using these large language models on the internet or generative AI tools on the internet, when you are supplying data to it in form of prompts, that data can be subject to unintentional leaks, and malicious actors can use it to construct deepfakes and mimic real individuals. So that's a danger. So data encryption and anonymization may be used, but for participants, informed consent may be required. And the AI models are generally like a black box. They lack transparency generally. And these companies don't tell you what is in their model. ChatGPT, initially they used to explain what they did in terms of training, the structure and all that, but with time now, they hide the details, apparently because of competition. So lack of transparency and explainability usually erodes trust in research findings. So there is a need to improve this aspect. It's actually a huge ethical issue as we speak. And then these tools are also a threat to academic integrity. They defeat the development of critical thinking and problem-solving skills, you know? Like students, they would want just to go on ChatGPT and not study. Everything they do, they take it to a large language model. At the end of the day, they may come up with nice, especially assignments which we hand out. But at the end of the day, they know nothing. And there is also a danger that they may submit an output from a large language model that is basically false. And AI can be exploited for research fabrication and plagiarism. And there is a need for guidelines for responsible use of AI, actually, in research. Academic institutions will have to adapt quickly for the potential impact on careers of some people and let them adapt to technological changes, because the way things are coming, many routine tasks are already being taken by AI. But as we go, non-routine tasks will also be taken by AI. And the ethical review committees will need to be trained on how to evaluate AI projects, because we have these ethical review committees in place, but maybe the people don't know how to evaluate AI projects. It is an issue. And for a university like UWC, it will be a good idea to invest in fine-tuning open source generative AI models and hosting them locally for purposes of privacy, especially when you use your own data and you use prompts online or on the cloud. And open source, because it will also give an opportunity to our students to learn how these things operate at code level. And that will help us to build the necessary skills that can be crucial in this economy going forward. And the other thing is generative AI resonates well with what we have in UWC as virtual reality and augmented reality. That is in the generation of stuff for virtual worlds. So I feel like this university can invest in this and proactively push it. And yeah, so that's all I had. Thank you for your attention. That is my email address. If you find something interesting, you can contact me through that on that email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyirenda, for your presentation. I think I will take a few questions from the chat, and then we'll allow our second speaker to continue with their presentation. Then if there are any left questions, we can attend to towards the end of the session. So I think one of the burning questions on the chat, someone asked if you could discuss briefly the cost and pricing models for the systems that were presented.
Okay. I think consensus and elicit, there is a free version. Just like for ChatGPT, there is a free version. So for those two, there is a free version, which in my view, I think for student work will work fine. But if you feel like paying, I think it shouldn't be more than 20 Rand, I mean, not 20 Rand, 20 US dollar per month for the paid version of those two. For Research Rabbit, it's free, 100% free, as in free, mahala.
Okay, thanks, Doc. The other question is, are there any UWC policies regarding the use of artificial intelligence in teaching and learning?
That one will be a bit difficult for me to answer because I'm not coming from that line of teaching and learning. I'm coming from the line of research. but I don't think there is any policy as yet, to the best of my knowledge, because I was head of department before I became eResearch director. So, but it is something whereby we need to have something in place as a matter of urgency. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prof. I think we are going to hand over now to our next speaker. Some of the questions that are coming up in the chat, we can spare some time to attend to towards the end of the session. So thank you so much, Prof. Our next speaker is Mr. Raymond Crown from the ICS department. Mr. Raymond Crown is the Director of Information and Communication Services at UWC, and he will be sharing a presentation with us today on optimizing IT operations for AI in academic research and touch on challenges, strategies, and future direction. Thank you so much, Mr. Crown, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Raymond Crown, and I'm the Director for IT or ICS at UWC. My conversation is I guess elevating the discussion a little bit, just in terms of the context of AI and the thinking that we're doing at the moment in terms of preparing ourselves for what is coming, and the potential applications or use cases that might become necessary for IT to accommodate in the future. So let me just get my my presentation on the screen. So let me show my screen. If you could let me know what you can see, if you can see it, and then
We can see your slides, sir.
so let me just move this across here and change the. Are you seeing the slides, or are you seeing the?
We see your slide, the cover slide of your presentation.
Only the cover slide with a
Yes.
note?
AI in academic research.
And there's no, you can't see the notes.
No, we don't see your notes
Okay,
yet.
perfect. Okay, so I think so. I'm not going to talk much about the plagiarism aspect of AI. I think the key for me is that if you understand the context of LLMs in terms of where we're at the moment, based on the technology and the capability that's available, which is the fact that it is a models that's trained on existing knowledge, existing data, and all it does in terms of how you engage with it is it provides you a view of the existing data based on the context or the question or the engagement that you are having with it. It doesn't create new knowledge. It doesn't reason in the sense that in terms of how it provides the information, it just regurgitates existing content in the context of your engagement with it or with the model. So by nature of that, the assumption should be that any input received could be potentially perceived as plagiarism because it's a reproduction of the existing knowledge. How you apply it in terms of how you use it from a research perspective is then a personal or an institutional kind of context that needs to be enforced. It does not reason, and that is the fundamental context in terms of what exists within AI or these large language models at the moment. So if from an IT perspective, when I look at AI, obviously the big concern is the fact that in order to have a custom or a localized capability, it is quite resource intensive. It's quite resource dependent. The extent to which it may be used or may be applied as a requirement for whatever infrastructure is in place to be scalable, for data to be accessible, and for data to be accessible at scale. And then also for the fact that there needs to be a level of security in place that allows for the let's say, the open or the accessible usage of whatever is being put in place. most of the universities, based on where I'm sitting, do have challenges in terms of maintaining and modernizing infrastructure because of the cost overhead associated with it. And so when I consider AI, what may be required, there's a huge concern in terms of what is possible within the context of universities almost managing and acting on their own in terms of facilitating it, right? From a future architecture perspective or from a future perspective, the reality is that we're not 100% clear in terms of how we want to use the capability. I think there's a lot of testing going on, a lot of tools being created, but the proliferation of tools is I think it's almost kind of a reinforcement of the fact that there's a lot of testing going on in terms of what could be used, what could be done with the capability in place, but no clear guidance in terms of the relevance, I guess, at some levels with universities, with institutions, with companies. And it's very difficult to have a level of comparison to apply to how we plan. So we don't have reference models in terms of assessing our current capability versus future required capability. And as a result, a lot of our planning requirements has to be informed by the engagement with the facilities available at the moment. And we need to basically use that as input in terms of considering how we plan for the future. So based on where I'm at in my role at UWC, I find it very difficult to really estimate where we need to go. And purely because I'm not 100% certain in terms of those use cases are actually relevant to what we need to do. So from that perspective, there are a number of areas where there are very or tested use cases, but in the application, in the actual application of the research activity, in terms of data analysis, pattern recognition, prediction, and these are things that can be done quite well with a lot of the AI capability in place. Trend analysis, decision support. These are things that is almost kind of in the mainstay of the capabilities available, and it's specifically to support research type activity. I think the key thing for me in terms of this slide is that there's a lot of potential areas where we can really apply AI effectively. But then it's a question of there's so many domains that we could potentially do it in. Do we then look at our internal context in terms of what we can facilitate with our existing infrastructure? Do we by default choose a direction of where we say, let's use the cloud-based facilities and let's try and exploit it as much as we can because we don't have the internal infrastructure? Or do we try and find an in-between in terms of allowing or creating the capability for people to be able to move when they want to do this type of research? It's broad and it is contextual to each university or the focus in terms of what they have from a research perspective. And so there's also that situation of there's no one size fits all in terms of how we could potentially plan from a research perspective. So what I did was I had a bit of an assessment, or I did a bit of an assessment in terms of where I believe we are from a UWC perspective. So the red, amber, greens are basically, I guess, our current state for all intents and purposes. So we've recently acquired a high-performance computing capability. The reality is it's not going to be enough. The reality is it's not going to be sufficient in what the demand might be, dependent on the different use cases that might get applied. We've got sufficient storage. We've got sufficient capacity in terms of operations. Once we look at AI within our infrastructure, then it's another situation of we're not going to have enough. And we need a lot of data to be able to train models on. So it's going to have a huge implication in terms of our data storage, data management capability. From a connectivity perspective, I think we're okay. Security and compliance, again, the context of the data or the models, how it's being trained, how it's being facilitated in terms of giving people access. There was a question around policies that needs to be in place in terms of us having a level of control in terms of how it's used. We're not there yet. We've done some work, but we're not there yet. Energy is a concern for everyone in South Africa, more so for universities. And this does have a direct implication in terms of how we could potentially internally build capability to facilitate research. We have to really apply our minds in terms of what those implications are going to be, because those data centers that really run these AI models are really, really energy intensive. And then obviously, if we really want to get value out of these models, if we put it in place, we need to make sure that we're able to integrate it to those underlying systems or sources that can really allow you to give the value at the point where people are engaging with the data. So from that perspective, and this is something that was mentioned in the previous presentation, is the fact that ChatGPT is kind of the flavor of the day. It is not the be all and end all in terms of what is available. There's actually a lot of LLMs or large language models out there. And there's a lot of, let's call it specificities in terms of how these models have been built and how they've been developed. So there's no direct comparison that you can sometimes apply in terms of those models that's out there. So the question is, when you're looking at using AI, using these models, which ones do you choose? Do you look at it from using it in combination with one another? Do you want to have access to all of them just in case you're able to, or you might want to apply it in a specific way? These are questions that obviously is very fundamental in terms of using models and that's already out there, that's already available in the cloud, right? So the context and the specific use case in terms of what is required really needs to be explored more in order to determine which models are most appropriate for what you want to try and achieve from a research perspective. On the slide on the right-hand side, I kind of gave a view in terms of how the whole context of large language models have evolved for the last number of years. And what you'll notice is that over the last 12 months or so, there's been huge advancements and shifts, as we've all seen through with ChatGPT and others in 2023. And I think this is just going to increase. But what I've realized is, what I've noticed is that a lot of the changes that's happening at the moment is actually a level of backtracking based on what was done last year, because a lot of the capability that was pushed out almost in a way where people weren't sure about what the outcome is going to be. And because there were no policy in place or legislation in place to constrain what is being pushed out, it was almost done at risk. And I think toward the end of last year, if everyone's been following the news, what people found was that actually a lot of these ethical challenges were starting to show itself, and it wasn't anticipated. So there was a big shift to kind of almost try and contain the situation with most of the models out there. And now there's more focus around the ethical or enforcing ethical, let's call it alignment on the models in place. But the challenge with that is that it by definition creates bias within the models that's being built, and bias with respect to the capability that's been made available. And I think the big expectation this year is for this whole context of reasoning in terms of what they call the next level of AI. The word escapes me now. Is expected to show itself in the next 12 to 18 months potentially. But the challenge with that is, again, what does that mean from an ethical perspective in terms of implications for how people may use it or what may want to use it? So there's a lot of models available. There's a lot of ways to use those models. But as a research institution, when we have to make a decision in terms of what capability we create internally, where do we go, or what do we use as a reference to start creating that capability? Moving to the next slide. So uh, the expectation is, so the general kind of response would be, okay, so let's focus on what's available in the cloud. But then obvious questions come to the fore in terms of, do we know the extent of the potential cost in terms of how we're going to use the model? Are we clear in terms of how that cost might escalate dependent on how we start using it? How comfortable are we that our proprietary information is being managed in an externally managed cloud? How does us using those cloud-based facilities impact our ability to actually use it practically within our institutions? What is the impact on data latency when it comes to where these models are physically being hosted or managed? How easy is it to integrate our internal sources to those cloud-based models, and how easy is it then to extract the value from that? And then will the data in the cloud be compliant once we've integrated it in, once we've loaded all the data associated or required to kind of do the work that we want to do? And then obviously, can we manage it? Do we have the capability and the expertise? And does the fact that we're using these cloud-based models immediately put a limitation in terms of our ability to shift if we realize, or if we found at some point that those models are not relevant or suitable for us from a long-term or medium-term perspective? How locked in are we going to be once we've committed to a specific architecture or state in terms of, or capability in terms of what's available? So the fact is that we have to apply our minds, right? I mean, but we can't wait. We can't wait for the wave to come. We have to almost shift as things are changing, but shift in a way that we can extract the benefit once we are clear in terms of what we want to do. We can commit once we are clear on what we want to do, but we should shift along the way. One of the key things is creating or improving that awareness in terms of people's understanding in terms of what AI is. And I think the previous presentation went a long way in terms of kind of driving that awareness. We have to acknowledge that AI is really powerful in terms of a number of aspects that I've touched on, and that can support researchers in terms of what they have to do. So we have to kind of latch onto that, but we also have to be selective in terms of how we do that. We have to experiment, right? And I think using internal capability to do experimentation is maybe the most prudent way of approaching it. But we have to experiment to determine what is most suitable for us in terms of where we want to be. And then we also have to understand what is out there, right? And what it brings to the table in terms of what we need as research-led institutions. I've spoken about the ethical and the social aspects. And I think the reality is that this is probably going to be the most significant component in terms of deciding how you want to use your models in the future from a research perspective. Because the reality is, I think even if you, I think if you look at how some of these models have changed the way they give responses over the last 3 to 4 months, I would say, you can see there's a lot of back end curating going on in terms of the interpretations of your prompts and the types of responses that it gives. And in some cases, it refuses to answer because it believes that you've breached its, let's call it ethical thresholds in terms of what it can, what responses it can give you. So the question is, whose ethics are the ethics that trumps all other ethics in terms of how you look at the situation? And for me, that is going to be a debate that's probably going to be going on for a while. And then I think for me, when you look at all the models available and you look at the type of capability that's out there, if you really want to extract value, you have to find a way to try and have a level of aggregation or aggregated access to a number of models that kind of gives you kind of holistically what you need. So ideally you want to be able to pick a few models that specifically deals with your requirements, and then have an abstraction kind of level access to all those models dependent on the need at the time. And for me, that is probably where we're going to go also in terms of moving forward, where people will have by default access to multiple models through some of the tools that will become available. And I think that is probably the most practical way to approach it moving forward, because the models will change over time, and your need in terms of the models that you use will change over time. So it doesn't make sense for you to lock yourself into specific models at this stage, in my mind. But I do think that we need to do all these things, and we need to apply our minds when we look at these models before we commit ourselves, especially when there's a level of investment required in order for us to commit ourselves. And that's really my thinking around AI, and in terms of preparing ourselves to be able to facilitate the wave once it hits us. I do think it's an exciting space to be in. I do think there's huge benefit that's going to be had based on the changes that's happening in the industry. But I do think that from a university perspective, we really have to consider the sustainability in terms of the direction we take when we commit to exploiting AI within the research context. And I think that is my final slide. I'm not sure if there's any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Crown, for your presentation and all the insightful topics you mentioned. One of the questions that came up on the chat, it's asking, how is ICT prepared for the protection of personal information or personal data and compliance with POPIA in the era of artificial intelligence?
I think the response there is simple. We've got POPIA related policies in place, and it speaks to the usage of information. So you can utilize any information if you have the authorization and authority to be able to do it in the context that you specified it for. And if you're able to do that, we can still manage personal information in the context of AI, because the same rules will apply, in my mind.
Okay. The second question from Fungai M is asking, how does AI bulk data analysis tools compare with the old traditional data analysis tools such as SPSS?
That is a good question. I don't know SPSS personally. Maybe Dr. Nyirenda could respond to that. But I think the key thing is the fact that you've got the benefit of the training. You've got the benefit of the fact that you've tuned the model in a way that you want it to interpret the training data. And you're able to get much more responsive outputs based on the assessment of the data. But that's what my limited understanding in terms of what SPSS does.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think those were the main questions on the chat. Some of the questions were repetitive and some of them were answered through responses to other questions. So I'm not going to read all of them from the chat. Are there any questions from the floor? Besides the one on the chat? We've enabled users to be able to unmute themselves. So if there's any other further questions, please go ahead.
I see there is a question around Gemini by Google that was released recently. We're still doing our internal assessments in terms of the activation, because once we activate it, obviously it's available to everyone. And there are obviously some considerations that we have to apply, but it is something that we are looking at the moment. I think in my mind, the key is for us to experiment, and to facilitate that, we need access to the tools. And if we are able to provision those tools for people to be able to experiment more, then we will definitely do that.
All right, thank you, sir. If there are no further questions, colleagues, I'm now going to hand over to my library director, Dr. Clement Nyirenda, for the concluding remarks. Over to you, Dr. Nyirenda.
Thank you so much, Chair. I want to sincerely thank Dr. Nyirenda, the Director of eResearch, as well as Mr. Raymond Crown, for their very insightful, very knowledgeable on the topic of AI and the integration. I think this is something that we as a university, not only as a university, as individuals grapple with and are looking towards some direction around using AI. I think it's something that we all going to start doing sooner or later, because it is like the internet, and it is linked to that and the benefits it has. But the one thing I do want to say, though, is, and I think librarians have always been championing the cause of always critically evaluate the information and, look at how, what is behind it, what is the ethics, and look at using information ethically and responsibly. So thank you so much for our presenters. It is very insightful presentation. Sincerely, is something that we as a university need to look towards and engage in. I think one of the big things was looking at creating awareness and understanding by engaging in AI tools, and looking forward for how do we critically use these tools to enhance our research, to enhance the way that we think and act responsibly. Colleagues, I also want to thank the 141 participants that attended the webinar. So certainly does look that like there is huge opportunity in the university so that we can engage and deliberate on the issue of AI and intelligence. And with that, I want to thank everybody for attending, our presenters, and wish you well for the evening. Thank you so much, colleagues. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.